Hey, welcome back to Truepokerdealer live stream. My name is Mark, and you're with me for as long as you want to stay here. Today, I am going to be doing just a regular Q&A, but next week, I do have a special guest. I'm going to bring on Masters of Cards, who has a lot of YouTube followers. I'm pretty blown away by his channel, honestly. Let me show you guys what this is all about. Ooh, I'll let you watch as I type it in. Next week's going to be pretty cool. We're going to be talking about surveillance, and he is a card magician. So this is going to be some good stuff. I'm going to start doing some interviews. I basically booked him, and now I have to figure out how to make it work. But that's just the process here, right? So let's see. What do I want to put on here? Put this on YouTube, and I'll share it with you guys so you can see right here. All right, so we're gonna go Masters of Cards, and this is going to be, it's with a Z here. This is gonna be next week. He'll be on. He's got a lot of good stuff. He has 106,000 subscribers. He's got me crushed, which I certainly respect. And he's been a guest in one of my live streams in the chat before, and we sort of got to talking, and that's how this started. So he's gonna be seeing sort of if he can beat surveillance, and I'm going to be telling him he can't, but you know, we never know. He has some skills for sure. So that is going to be next week on Tuesday at 2 p.m. I'm pretty excited about that. And right now it's a normal Q&A, and pretty much everything that you are used to with me, you can ask me anything you want. Because I am going to start being a little bit more focused with specific content I'm going to go over every week, now's a good time to get your last questions in. You know, we've had some interesting developments going on. I might as well just jump in and start talking about this. Poker has something special happening right now that I've really never seen before. Right now we have a heads-up match going on. I don't know if it's literally right now going on, but Daniel Negreanu and Doug Polk, probably the two most well-known YouTubers for poker, they're going heads-up. Right now, I believe they're playing 2 tables of online. It started with 200 live hands, and I watched every single one of those 200 live hands between Negreanu and Doug Polk. Pretty fascinating. They're playing 200, 400, no-limit Texas Hold'em heads up for a total of 25,000 hands. And, you know, we all know Daniel Negreanu is this absolute god of poker who... He seems to be the most popular player out there. Recently, he's maybe hurt his reputation a little bit by having some blow-ups, which we all sort of find pretty entertaining. But, you know, overall, he is the kid of poker, and even though he's in his 40s now. And so he's got this little beef that's been going on for years with Doug Polk, and they decided to turn it into an actual match. And the first 200 hands were absolutely fascinating. Watching Daniel play live is always a joy, and honestly, Doug seemed pretty uncomfortable. But since they switched to live poker, Doug has been cleaning up. But listen, they're only about maybe 800 or 900 hands in out of the 25,000. So this thing's going to go on for quite a long time. And Doug Polk is a 4-1 favorite in Vegas over Daniel, which is pretty fascinating. So, I mean, can you imagine anyone being that much of a favorite playing poker against Daniel Negreanu? And yet that's what it is. Why? For anyone who's ever tried to play heads up, it's a completely different game. You know, I think the simplest way to show the difference is when you're heads up and you're playing every single hand literally, and your opponent's playing every single hand literally, the ranges are so different than when you're against multiple opponents because of, you know, what's likely to win by the end when there's only 2 possible Texas Hold'em hands. So that's been pretty interesting watching it. And there's a book, I think it's called Easy Game, that has a chapter or 2 about heads up that I really liked. I've read that book. I think I have a PDF copy that I read years ago. And yeah, it's interesting with all that stuff going on right now. So Daniel and Doug Polk. By the way, just to talk about this, Daniel Negreanu keeps calling Doug Polk internet troll, and you know, he says something along the lines of he's very aggressive when he's online, and then when he's in person, he's much more nice, and that's very characteristic of a troll. And it's really interesting. Maybe you guys will see the same thing. You can watch the 3-hour live session between them for 200 hands of 200, 400, no limit heads up. You can watch that on YouTube for free. When I watch that, I notice that Daniel is also a troll. Every single time he wins, he just rubs it in that special way. And boy, was it getting under Doug's skin. But he's not able to do that type of stuff to Doug when they're playing online and they can't actually interact with each other. So that's super fascinating as well. You know, part of Daniel's game seems to be conversation. And yeah, Daniel's a bit of a troll too, but it's completely different type, right? Daniel's trolling is, it's almost like he takes his natural excitement in the moment and he amplifies it in a way that needles somebody. And I just thought that was really interesting to watch. If you want to see it, you can see it yourself. Like, for example, he wins the very first hand of the heads up thing. Doug bluffs on the river, the very first hand of them going at it. And Daniel makes the call, wins probably 10K more than he otherwise would have. And he gets up and he's like, okay, that's it. We're done. I'm not playing anymore, type of thing. Oh, man, did that get under Doug's skin. It really got to him. Like, you could see that stuff really got to him. But, yeah. So anyway, so here we are. This is going to be one of the last Tuesdays that I do just a straight up QA. So I do encourage all your questions, especially today. And, you know, pretty soon I'm going to be shifting to having guests on. I sort of booked somebody. Masters of Cards is going to be awesome, talking about surveillance next week. And I booked somebody, and we're going to be pretty focused on what we're talking through for the session. So I'm pretty excited about this. I hope that you guys are excited about it as well. And yeah, ask your questions now. Anything related to dealing. Let's see. You know, last week I saw, just as a little recap, somebody came in the chat and they were talking about how they're in a course right now. And in that course, or they just finished a course and it was 3 weeks and they learned everything from mechanics and like everything from scratch all the way through Omaha and Big O. And they were saying how 3 weeks just isn't enough time, honestly. And, you know, I tend to agree with that for sure. The real challenge when you're learning how to deal poker is you go into it, generally speaking, thinking that what you have to learn about how to deal is relatively simple, straightforward. Like, what are you doing? You're just giving people cards and letting them do what they want, right? And what you find out as you start getting into it is there's an entire world full of rules, okay? And those rules they don't come up a whole lot, but you do have to know all of them. And so if you want to learn how to be able to just pitch cards to a table, well, you can do that pretty quickly. But if you want to learn, you know, how to handle a scenario where a player makes an unclear bet and then another player makes an unclear verbal declaration and there's all these different things and you're the dealer and you're the one that has to handle this, there's sort of a lot to it. So it's interesting hearing, like he said 3 weeks was not enough time to learn everything. I totally agree with that. And it's like a lot of people ask me, how long does it take to learn to be a dealer? Well, the answer is it's about 120 to 140 hours. However, as this person pointed out last week, it cannot be super quick. There has to be some incubation time. So just sort of throwing that out there too. Well, what I'm going to do now, since, let's see. Since we don't have any questions yet, I had a very large question in one of my Texas Hold'em lessons videos. Oh, yeah, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to sort of answer that right here. So here's the question. Okay, so I answered the first question. In my video, I say bring your own personality to the table. This is the, actually I forget which video it is, lesson 31, how to run your game. Yeah, bring your own personality to the table. And the question was, like, what do you mean exactly by that? And so the answer to that is, when I say bring your own personality to the table, when you're dealing poker, let's see. Actually, I want to use the answer that I gave here. I'm going to read it and then I'll talk about it right after. So let's see. My intent here is, when I talk about bring your own personality to the table, my intent is to let dealers know that they're going to be the best dealer they can be by including their own genuine personality while they're dealing. Everyone has strengths that they bring to the job that they learn just by being who they are. And I basically want people to allow themselves to be human, and the job will be a lot easier. Like, for me, I'm very good when it comes to sort of understanding the game really, really well and using that as my crutch. And so my conversation can sort of bounce off of that. Some other people, like I've met female dealers who, they're very motherly in nature, and if they bring that motherly nature to their dealing, which I would never be able to do, that motherly nature is very diffusing, it's calming. It's their own personal personality that I suggest. Like, everybody's got their strengths, right? So as a dealer, a lot of people ask me, like, how are you supposed to be? Well, that depends on who you are. Utilize your strengths in your own communication and your own energy, right? And I'm not trying to be like hippy dippy with this, but I mean, it's a real thing. The way that you affect other people is your energy. So let's replace the word energy with how you affect other people. Take that thing that you do well, take the good parts of it and inject it in as a dealer. And then your conversations are unique to you, and people get a unique experience whenever you come to the table. Now, obviously, you have to do that in a way that does not cross any lines for the job, and you need to be aware of what those lines are. But that is a very valuable approach there. Eddie says, when is the big blind an option in dealing the hand? Okay, it's a fair question. So this is toward the basics, and I have no problem going through this. So let's see. I'm going to take a bunch of $1 chips, and I'm going to make sure that we can see this nice and cleanly. Can we see right here? Yeah, we can sort of see here. So we've got this right here. Get this out of the way. And I'll put some more chips over here. We're pretending these are all $1 chips just for the sake of this. Why not, right? It'll be like a little limit game or something. All right. So we'll have 5 stacks. And I'll get my mouse out of the way and just move some of these chips off to the side. All right, so we got 5 stacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say that we're playing 2-4 limit Texas Hold'em, which means the blinds are 1 and 2, because in limit, the big blind is always going to be the first number that said the lower number. So 2-4 limit, that means the big blind is 2, the small blind is going to be 1 when the big blind is 2. All right, so we're going to deal, I'll pretend that I shuffled this. Here, we'll put it like this. We'll cut, and then I'm going to deal out 5 players, all right? And the question is, when does the big blind have an option? So each of these players here, when it's their turn, this player has 3 options. They can fold, they can call for 2, because that's the big blind, or they can raise to 4. In limit Texas Hold'em, you can only raise by 1 increment. That's a specific increment. Unless you're all in, then you can do less. All right, so let's say that this player raises to 4. We'll say this player folds, this player folds, this player calls 4. So in this case right here, this player has to stay in for 2 more if they want to play. They can't just have an option, okay? Because this player raised. So the first option, or the first possibility, is somebody raises and it's the big blind's turn. Well, if somebody's raised and it comes around to the big blind, then the big blind cannot just have an option. This is a case where they would have to either fold, call for 2 more, or they could raise for a total of 6, right? Now let's back it up, and we'll put these cards back, and we'll put these cards back over here. And now second possibility is this player right here, they call for 2, this player folds, this player calls for 2. This was only supposed to be 1, this is a small line, that was from before. This player calls for 2. Now, everybody has called. This player now has what's called an option. Okay, that option is there's no folding for them at this point. Technically, if they want to fold, they can, but actually, you as a dealer in most casinos, if they throw their cards in here, you can actually push them back to protect the player who's in the big blind. Maybe they didn't realize they were the big blind or something. A lot of casinos give that courtesy for the big blind when it has not been raised. This player's real options are they can check or they can raise. That is what is known as the option on the big blind. So it comes up anytime nobody has raised and it gets around to the big blind. That's when they get their option to either check or raise. And if you're dealing, always make sure that you give them that option and that they take a very clear path, right? They have to have a clear action. So they either have to check, they have to say raise, they have to do something that is taking their action. Because if you look at them and they look back at you, which some of these players do that, it's so weird. If you look at them, they look at you and you just go, okay, and you bring the flop, and they say, wait, I didn't act yet. They're in the right, all right? Unfortunate as it is, if a player doesn't actually take an action on the big blind, this is going to end up being a premature flop, and you're sort of giving them that opportunity to see the flop and then say something if they want. Now, a supervisor, if they know that that's what happened, they can certainly take advantage of that, but it's going to be hard to prove a lot of the time. So you as a dealer, you do want to make sure that the player clearly either checks or raises. Whether it's by tapping the table, by saying the word check, or by putting additional chips in if they're going to raise, or by saying raise. So thank you for that question. Hopefully that cleared that up. And I'm going to clean up my mess. So going back to this other question. So here's the next question. It was... Let's see. What is the first thing you say to two players that are getting out of line? I understand if a player loses on a bad beat on the river and yells the F word. You said that was okay in most circumstances. I never did this as a player. I get the, I think that's over the line. Guys, that's enough. What else have you had to do to keep a situation from escalating? If they don't listen to you at that point and tone it down, do you then call for the floor for them to handle it? Otherwise, it's quite disruptive to the rest of the game. So the question that's basically being asked here is, when a couple players are getting out of the line, like, what do you do? Okay, and I addressed this in the All Texas Hold'em Lessons course, the 38 lesson course where I teach everything about how to deal. And so this question is actually on that video, so you wouldn't normally be able to see this comment, but I'm reading it now for the group because everybody can benefit from this stuff. So the real answer here is, first of all, you want to approach these types of situations where players are getting out of line from the perspective of being preventative, okay? You as a dealer don't have much authority in terms of what players are saying to each other, okay? That's really where it comes to the floor. So the first thing I want to say is, the question here is, what is the first thing you say to two players that are getting out of line? If they're actually out of line, you immediately call the floor. And if they say, whoa, whoa, blah, 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 all you have to say to them is, well, I didn't know, so I need a floor here. Okay, now what is getting out of line? Getting out of line would be two players who are confrontational with each other in any way, okay? This is, some dealers think, well, I have to handle this. That is a terrible way to handle it. Every single time two players are confrontational toward one another, you, the dealer, must call a floor to the table immediately. That is the only way that it's going to de-escalate quickly, all right? There's not a thing that you can say to them. Now, what if they're underneath that threshold where they're not actually confrontational with each other, but it's a little bit much? Now, some dealers will say straight up, they're going to sort of tone it down on their own. They're going to allow the players to work it out, and they're not going to try to get a supervisor there. I don't really recommend that. I would say, let's say that one player says, hey, I didn't like the way that you just did that. Don't do that again. And the other player says something like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Like, at that point, you don't really need to step in, okay? The first player said that they didn't like, maybe the player accidentally slow rolled or something. The other player was apologetic, and it seems to diffuse itself. Okay, there's no cursing at each other or anything like that. That's not really out of line. That's sort of you observing and just being ready to call floor if you need to. But once this player says, hey, I didn't like what you said, and then the other one says, well, that's tough, or something like that, okay? Now, nobody's over the line, but there is a good opportunity to jump in here. The first thing that I would assess with me as the dealer is, do I have any rapport with any of these players, okay? Having rapport in this spot makes a huge difference. If I've dealt to these people before, let's say that we've had little friendly banter at one point or another, I would handle it completely case by case. I'm not the type of person who's going to come in and give a specific catch-all solution, because I don't really think a catch-all solution is the right way to handle this type of thing. I would say when two players are sort of getting out of line, for me, I'm always going to approach it from the I know these guys and therefore I can handle these guys specifically. And sometimes it's a woman too. I mean, unfortunately for women, it's a very confrontational environment, and women aren't as used to that. The women that are used to confrontation, sometimes they have to be extra confrontational just to fit in at the table and get people off their back. It's always sort of frustrating to see that as a dealer. Christopher says, I just joined. Can you get me up to date? So I'm sure, and I appreciate you asking that. I'm answering the question, what's the first thing you say to two players that are getting out of line? And this is a question that's in the membership group for the All Texas Hold'em lessons. So most people won't be able to see these comments, but I did want to share some of the answers here. So, the discussion is, well, what's actually out of line? Out of line is specifically when somebody is cursing at somebody else directly, right? If someone lost a hand and they say the F word to themselves, that's not getting out of line. If they say F you to a person across the table, or they curse directly at somebody, or you as a dealer, that's over the line. That's not getting out of line. It's completely over the line. You call floor immediately for that, and you tell the floor what happened. You don't give your opinions. You just say the thing that happened, okay? This player lost a hand, and then they cursed at this player. That's all you say. Or this player lost a hand, and then they cursed at this player, and this player retaliated and cursed back, right? Generally speaking, poker rooms aren't going to pick sides. If both people are a part of the problem and escalating it, then they're both going to be asked to leave more times than not. But and that is a bit of a setup, but it's also sort of the way that it works. So, what's another thing? If any player ever says, this is really important, if any player ever says, do you want to take this outside? That is an ejection in most rooms that are intelligent, okay? I have seen plenty of places where someone will say, do you want to take it outside? And they have their rules about cursing, and they didn't cross those lines or any of that stuff. And the person who said that is allowed to stay. No. If somebody threatens to take it outside or ask somebody else to take it outside for a real fight, and they're serious on any level, or even if you can't tell, you call the floor immediately, you tell the floor what happened. Right? And a good poker room will tell that person that they got to go home for at least 24 hours, because you can't have people creating that environment in a room at all. Another thing that can happen where people are getting out of line is someone can just start sort of chirping, right? And getting loud, and a lot of poker players, they do try to tilt other poker players, and they sort of know the lines that they're allowed to cross and the lines they're not allowed to cross. If you have one of those poker players at your table and they're under the line regularly, and it's your table, and they're causing other people to have a negative experience where you can justify saying that players are uncomfortable playing in this room because of the way this player is behaving, that would be a time for you to step in and say, hey, you got to back off on that. Or if you don't want to do that, because these players are generally pretty savvy and they'll fire back at you with things that you don't want to deal with, just call the floor and say, it's often easy to call a supervisor to the table and use your communication with the supervisor to notify the player of what it is you need them to hear, right? So I could call floor table 7, and everyone will be like, why'd you call the floor? What happened, right? And they get there and they're like, all right, this player over here, he hasn't said anything that technically crosses a line, but I can tell that he's making other players at this table uncomfortable with the way that he's communicating with them, something like that, right? And, he just talked about this, he told this player to do this, he told this player to do this, and he'll just be all defensive, blah, blah, blah. And hopefully the supervisor will pick up on the fact that this is not good for the room, right? And if I'm the supervisor and I get something like that, and I get called over for something like that, I'm gonna sort of play dumb, and I'm gonna ask and this is good. If you're a supervisor, use this technique. It works really well. I'm going to ask the player, okay, my dealer just called me over. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. Can you just come chat with me for one moment? He'll come chat. He doesn't have a choice. Like if he says no, I'm not gonna do it. I would say, okay, I know that I asked you to come, but I wasn't really like asking. I do need to talk to you. I just got called over to the table because of this, whether or not you're at fault, right? And so then if he refuses to do it, then you tell the dealer to deal him out, and then he's got no choice, okay? But that being said, the player comes and chats with you. The first thing that you say as a supervisor to this player is, okay, what happened, right? You give them a chance to give their perspective before you do anything else. And that usually diffuses it because now they feel like they're being heard. They get a chance to talk. And then at the end of it, you give them the perspective of the casino where, okay, so I have to find out more information, but I am going to ask you to tone it down a little bit. I understand your perspective here. I'm not saying that you crossed any lines, but we do have the ability to make our own decisions in the interest of the room. And right now the decision that I'm making is I need you to tone this down. It appears that you're probably making some players uncomfortable at the table, and they deserve to be comfortable just like you do. So, please understand where we're coming from, type of thing. Okay, these types of conversations are pretty challenging, but a little bit of experience goes a long way when it comes to supervising in these things. That's pretty much it. There's this strong weight, and the nature of this question being asked, like, well, what do you say? What are the lines that you say? It's not really about that. You just call the floor. If there's any potential for it to be negative, call the floor. Even if you're wrong, who cares? Like, they might give you a little bit of a hard time, like you didn't need to call the floor for that. And I would basically just say, well, I decided to do it. Hey, Dave, I'm actually answering your questions right here, right now, from the lesson. So good morning for sure to you. You're, I think, on the West Coast, so you got 5 more minutes of morning. Out here, it's almost 3 p.m. But yeah, I just gave you a complete answer to your question in the about when players get out of line, and now I'm going to move on to the next question. Dealing with difficult players carefully. So you mentioned dealing with difficult players carefully. I think you were referring to a home game, but would it apply to a casino too? You then say, I'm not experienced on what to do with it. I'm speaking up right now and calling the floor. I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with it. Even if you're wrong, you'll curb their behavior. Your behavior. I was never able to follow what it was regarding a difficult player. All right, so I think what I'm going to have to do for this one is I'm going to have to go to this actual lesson. And you guys are going to get a little bit of a sneak peek into the course, and you'll see what's being asked in the course. And I'll share the screen, and I will answer this. I'm going to watch this section of myself so that I can answer this question from the course. I don't know exactly what I say here, so I'm sort of excited to see what it is. When did you say it was? You said it was 2:06:27. Love the fact that you tagged these times. Super appreciate that. And it's lesson 31. So let's find lesson 31 so we can answer that. So we can watch that little snippet and then answer that question. Here we go. All right. Let's see. All right, I'm going to share this here, and I think I'll make it a little bigger. That looks good. All right, so now here's a bunch of these lessons from the course and how to run your game. Okay, so I'm going to open this one up, and this is my special screen. Let's see. All right, so now I got to go to.
This is more of a personal conversation.
That's where it is. 2:06:27. All right, 2:06:27.
Doing a home game, but I want to emphasize again, it's much easier to do that with a specific example. In general, dealing with difficult players has to be done carefully. You can actually, let me see. I'm trying to think, like, if I'm not experienced in a situation, I think the best way to handle it would be to say, look, I'm not experienced in what to do, whether or not this is okay, so I'm going to speak up right now and just call it floor. And if they say, no, you don't have to worry about it, just say, look, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with this decision, so I'm just going to call it floor.
They is the players in that case. So if the players are saying, "Oh no, don't worry," like players try to do that all the time. They just try to dismiss. But you're the one that's actually working it, so you can't go along with that.
You know, at the end of the day, even if you're right, even if you're wrong, you're still going to curb their behavior because people don't want to be bothered, right? Like they just want to be able to do stuff and not have it lead to consequences. So if they start to realize that you're just going to double check with everything that they do that's kind of over the line, they're going to stay away from the line. I'm starting to think now that I should spend more time at home games to experience some of these situations a little bit more intimately.
One thing you should know about me is I've dealt plenty. I've supervised and shift managed even more, but I haven't dealt a lot of home games without dealers, right? Most of the home games that I've been at, they've been a bunch of people that know the game really well. So it just leads to different types of situations. But that's such a pretty face, I leave pause.
I'm realizing that the home games that I play have a lot of dealers in them, and therefore people are very experienced. Some of these situations that I think you guys are experiencing have people that are far less experienced. What do you guys think? Is there any... what would be a good way for me to handle these difficult home game situations for all of you so that I can give you proper support? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? My intent, especially with the membership, for somebody like me, Barnes, who has purchased the membership, my intent is to make sure that you get what you need for this. And I mean, really for anybody, but especially for anybody that got a membership.
Well, I don't see the exact quote that you have here. Then say I'm not experienced on what to do with it. Yeah, I think basically what I'm saying is, I see the it. So I did say that. So that what that's referring to is here. Let me drop this back here. What I'm referring to there is basically there's a I'm saying there's a situation that comes up. Okay, as a poker dealer, I'm trained whenever there's something unusual, I'm supposed to call the floor. Okay. If a situation comes up that is unusual to me and I feel like I'm not comfortable with it, even if the players are saying, nah, don't worry about it, I'm still going to call the floor in that situation. And then I went on a tangent talking about in home games, well, you don't really have anybody to call, so you sort of have to make your own decision. I mean, at the end of the day, the expectation from a home game is much lower than the expectation from a live casino because home games are much more, it's whatever. I mean, people, there's some home games that are very professional, but for the most part, a home game is like people that don't play casino poker that much. And so it is just a very different experience. Let's see. Dave said I'll have to catch the beginning of it. Almost 11 a.m. here. Oh, so Van Shark, you're out somewhere even more west. Dave said, quotes from you, my fault. No, it's okay. And then I've got a bunch like that. I think what threw me was the curtail the behavior. That was it. I got you. Let's see. We got a question that says, can you show me a good layout for chip count with a good variation of colors? A good layout for chip count with a good variation of colors. I'm happy to do that. I don't understand exactly what you're asking as it is. So would you mind rephrasing that question with a little bit more detail so that I can sort of understand what you're trying to ask? It looks like, I can't pronounce the first name. It says, can you show me a good layout for chip count with a good variation of colors? Are you talking about it says tournament 14. Are you talking about a tournament stack, starting stack and everything? I mean, I can certainly help with that if you want to know how to set up a tournament. Let's see, what's the next question here? So the next question is call or forfeit. If it's 5, 40, 40, 130, and the next player calls 40, they're obligated to complete the bet or fold and lose the 40. Did I hear that right? Can the player that puts out the 40 say, I didn't see the 130 and do not wish to complete it? I'm sure that what comes up. Is this a common situation that comes up? If the player doesn't want to complete it and wants their 40 back, it's a floor call, I would assume. Yeah, so I mean, the good news there is the dealers don't need to enforce call or forfeit. It's basically, oh, you called, and then if a player has a complaint there, it's floor. The floor is going to come, and the TDA rules have been changing over the last 4 years, where now it's the original raise amount is going to be the one that somebody would have no choice, or the original bet amount or the original raise amount would be the one that somebody would have no choice with. I think I'm saying that right. It's in the TDA rules, and I could go refresh myself on it. But yeah, if someone's in for 40 in that case, a lot of rooms nowadays are going to allow them to forfeit for the extra amount that they didn't actually see. So let's say hypothetically it goes 5 raise to 40, call 40, re-raise to 130, and this player puts in 40, thinking that maybe this player said 130 and they acted more quickly than they should have or something. They're not actually on the hook for the full 130 in a lot of situations. That doesn't mean that some rooms won't force them. There's a lot of rooms that'll still force them to put the full 130. But call or forfeit is a thing. It's TDA driven, and honestly, I think that the way that it's being done is pretty intelligent. Where, they're trying to create as little damage as possible overall. Dave says, "Could you comment at a room you want to work? Could you comment at a room you want to work at? Should you go and play there, hang out, get to know some people by name? I did this the other day. Even security personnel and a floor guy." So yesterday I was actually on Vegas Aces live stream with Heather, and the question was how to get. Her entire thing was how to get a job in a poker room, and so we talked about that for about 45 minutes. If you want to go check out Vegas Aces on YouTube, you'll be able to see it there. We get into some of these types of details. One of the things that she suggested that I really like is going to a poker room that you're interested in getting an audition at by going in, showing up wearing black dress pants and a white button-down shirt and black dress shoes, and basically saying, hey, I have learned how to deal and I would love an audition with you guys, and talking to the supervisors, and maybe they'll say, like, you say, I'm ready to go right now if you need me to. Now, of course, you have to be ready to go if you're going to say that. But if you keep showing up, now, if they say, well, we need you to apply online, make sure you applied online before you go and you do that. So you go in and you show up, etc. Then they say, well, we only hire this every so often. Maybe they don't have jobs right away. Well, you keep an eye out, and then after a month, you show up again. You keep yourself getting better and better and training and practicing so that you're always ready to go. You show up again a month later, or maybe 2 weeks later, whatever it is that you think makes sense. Here's the thing, though. When you go in and you have these interactions with them, you have to do it from a very understanding perspective, right? You don't want to bug them in a negative way. You want to bug them in a good way. So you basically want to bug them in the sense that you're always there. You're showing up and you're always ready to go. You don't want to be like a poker player. You don't want to start telling them things where they might end up having to deal with you. They're not looking to deal with anybody. So show up, be available, say, look, I'd love a shot at this. Yes, you can go play poker for a little bit if you want to. You can wait around and try to talk to the person who does hiring. You can ask around to find out who actually does the hiring of the dealers, what's in the audition, stuff like that. But you don't want to come in and so a supervisor is there to work, okay? They have downtime, and sometimes it seems like they have nothing to do but talk to you, okay? But they're there to work, and whenever something happens in the room, they got to get it done. Sometimes they might have to get a bunch of stuff done that you might not realize, that they're in a conversation with you and they're sort of waiting to get that stuff done until they're done talking to you. And my point is, you want to show a certain type of awareness. So keep the conversations brief. You definitely don't want to come in there and have them dread that you're going to come back and try to tie them up for a 45-minute conversation, or even a 10-minute conversation, a really long time for a supervisor. That said, if you're there and you sort of like show up and you just be there, you give them your little 2 minute, like, I'm ready to go. I love an audition. I could do it right now even. I've applied online. I know where to look. I know what your rake is. You know, you've learned all that type of stuff. I know what games you guys deal. I'd love to work here, blah, blah, blah. And you know, talk about their culture a little bit. Maybe say like, you know, I'd love to work here because... If you do those things and you just sort of keep it short and sweet and you meet a couple of the floor managers over the course of a month or two, I think eventually you're going to get an audition. You know, they might ask you a little bit about your background. If all that you've done, if you've never dealt in a casino and all that you've done is learned through Truepokerdealer, tell them that you learned through Truepokerdealer and tell them it's a full course now. You don't have to tell them, like, you definitely want to communicate confidence that you deserve an audition. You might say, yeah, you don't want to make it sound like you can't pass an audition. You also do want to be aware, though, some poker rooms are able to hire much better dealers than others because they're very desirable poker rooms. Like down in South Florida, the Seminole tribes are able to hire better dealers than some of the parimutuel horse racing casinos because the people, they just have a better selection. There's constantly high quality dealers that are trying to get jobs there. Some of the peripheral rooms don't have as much to work with, so they sort of have to settle sometimes. So also you got to understand that. You certainly don't want to force your way into an audition before you can actually pass one. Dave says, this one does, I heard through another source. I caught a soup on a slow morning. Van Shark Tank says, so we all deserve an audition? I mean, here's the thing. You got to be able to sell yourself, right? A lot of people try to sell themselves to a poker room for an audition by sort of putting their application in and having that speak for itself. Other people, they go and they show that they're not annoying and they're going to have a good quality of character and they get it, right? Showing up in a white shirt and black pants, it shows that you get it. Auditions where people show up in jeans, it's just like... Oh man. Or if somebody comes to a poker room to play one day and they just come across as such a poker player where they're talking to, like, you don't want to talk to a floor about, you know, the hands that you played. You want to talk to them about getting a job and what's involved in it. And they're probably, like, here's the thing, if they're busy, they're going to brush you off. Okay. And sometimes it's hard for them to do that, especially for people that just want to talk, because they want every person who's a potential poker player customer to be treated well and respect them and all that stuff. Also, there's some supervisors that will talk to you forever just because they want to appear to be awesome. But, I mean, do we all deserve it? But poker rooms have hiring cycles, and whenever the hiring comes up, anybody who is a trained dealer realistically is probably going to get an audition in a room as long as they know that you're a trained dealer. That's been my experience. You know, I've hired hundreds of people. I would have to say it's probably up around like 600 at this point, and that means that I've done well over 1,000 auditions, probably about 1,500 of them for people trying to get jobs. I did an audition yesterday. I did it through a video audition, but you know, I'm still doing this stuff. So it's like when you look through the applicant pool in order to figure out who you want to give a shot to, you don't know who's going to end up passing the audition at that point. You just sort of have to guess. And one of the things you look for is if they can deal. So yeah, I mean, most of the time, someone who can deal is going to get offered an audition. Only in rooms, there's a very few rooms that can ask for multiple years experience as a poker dealer in order for somebody to get a job. It's not very common for people to be able to ask that, in my experience. Maybe 20% of the rooms are able to do that. Deserve is not the right word, though. It's, you know, do we all deserve an audition? No. If you come in and you start bugging them, I don't care how long you've been dealing. If they don't like you, they're not going to suggest that you get an audition. If they like you, they're going to suggest it. How do you make sure that they like you? Well, you don't take up a lot of their time. Now, look, you can take up a lot of their time if you go to them for your 1.5 minutes, you talk to them like I said to do, and then you make yourself available and they come over to talk to you. That's great. You know for sure, because they came to talk to you, that they're not feeling like they're getting their time sucked up. Maybe they are interested. Maybe they are going to be hiring soon. Maybe they want to make a name for themselves as a supervisor there, and they're like, hey, there's this person in here that seems like they might be good. I know that you got hiring coming up soon. Can I just give him an audition? Like, you never know what's going to happen. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity. I mean, every single second that you walk into a poker room that you're interested in working in, that's your interview. Your interview is a collection of all of the moments that the people that have worked there have gotten to know you. And so you got to be aware of that. It's not like the interview start. There's a Friends episode where Chandler has a good interview, and then at the end of it, he's like, man, I was really close to blowing that one. I forget what he said. He talked about poop or something because the guy made an unintentional joke. And, you know, the guy was looking at him like, and he's like, no, the interview's over. Like, it was over. But, you know, we all know that's not how it works, right? Let me see. Dave says, the room in question I've auditioned at before. I caught word they were hiring. Watching your videos can def help with experience. I also remember names of people that I come in contact with at the room. Yeah, and I think in your specific case, you seem to have a rapport with this room. I just, my advice is still the same. If you're going to show up, I would suggest you show up ready to do an audition on the spot. You never know, right? Sort of plant the seed for them. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. All right, so let's go to the next question here. So it says, I didn't quite follow, quote, obligate to put money in as a result of a bet call raise. The fact that they threw their hand away. All right, let's see what I said here. This is 200. Something like 25. So I'll pop this back up and we'll see what I say. Let's see what else.
If a player is obligated to put money into the pot by a bet, call, or raise, the fact that they have thrown away their hand does not relieve them of that obligation. They still have to put the money in. The dealer may and should try to prevent the hand from being fouled by contact with the muck.
If you know for sure that a player to have to
protect the muck, don't let their hand get in there. A lot of players are going to try to say, nope, I don't have cards, so therefore I don't have to pay. It's like, well, that's not true. So let me just protect you from yourself here. Like, that's literally the mentality.
So, yeah, it's sort of a rare situation. Let's see. So if a player verbally declares that they're taking some kind of an action and then they try to like back out of it, if you know that they have to put money into the pot, you should protect the muck at that point. You don't want that player who you know they're going to have to put money in the pot. You don't want them to have an excuse to get away from it, and you also don't want the unfortunate circumstance where they have no chance of winning and they still have to put money in the pot. You know, I understand that if you, let me see, it says, I understand that if you put in 40, are then raised to 100 with 2 calls back to you, whereby you fold, losing the 40, is that how I'm supposed to understand? There's no issue, I get it. I guess I'm not sure exactly what was being talked about there. I'll have to go. I'm going to figure this out later. I thought this would be a little bit more straightforward for me to understand. But I can say this. When there are times where a player will say, like, all in, and then something will happen. Maybe the other player exposes their hand because their like, action's done. And then the player who went all in sees that hand and doesn't want to put it in anymore. They try to get their hand in the muck so they don't have to put the money in. It's just not a situation that you want a player to be able to muck. Let's see, because it's like trying to muck because you're avoiding putting money in the pot is different than trying to muck because you're at showdown. You don't want someone to see your hand. Dave says, I also remember the names of people that I come in contact with at the room. That's very good. Knowing their names is great. Again, I would just make sure that you remember that every single person that you interact with is you're sort of being subjected to an indirect interview where like they can certainly, if you come across as awesome, they're going to communicate that. You know, if somebody asks them, if you come across as somebody that maybe they don't want to work there, they're going to communicate that too. So there's a strong social dynamic there as well. Let's see. So it says somewhere on your latest AMA video on Tuesday, a hand comparison came to me on reading the winner of an Omaha low hand. Say player 1 is holding 4-3 Jack 8. All right, well, let's actually put this up. 4-3 Jack 8. Here's a 4. Here's a Jack. Here's a 3. And here is an 8. All right, so we got 4-3 Jack 8. I'll put this here. And player 2 is holding Ace 3 King 10. All right, let me just go like this, it'll be quicker. Ace 3 King 10. All right. So these are the two hands here. Okay. The 5 community cards are 5, 6, 7 King Queen. 5, 6, 7 King Queen. Okay. Let's see. What I'd like to know is which of the two hands wins the low. Player 1 holds a straight, so they might win high, but if it's low, would player 2 win this example regarding the straight? Well, yeah, in this hand right here, these three, we're talking about Omaha 8 or better, so you have to have 5 total cards, 2 in your hand, 3 on the board, 5 total cards that are all 8 or lower. Straights don't matter when it comes to this. So this is a low right here, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. But an even better low would be right here, 7, 6, 5, 3, ace. The ace is low in when counting the low in 8 or better. So, excuse me, most of the time the 8 is going to be low. But yeah, in this particular case, it's going to be well, the flush doesn't matter when it comes to the low. Flushes, straights, none of that stuff matters. But yeah. Player 2 wins the low, and for anyone that doesn't know, I go over all this in the bonus mix games course. I have that. You can get it right here on YouTube. This is like just sort of scratching the surface. I certainly don't mind giving this information. In this case, half the pot in any high-low split game, half the pot goes to the highest hand, half the pot goes to the lowest hand. So 2 people could totally split the pot here. Player 1 holds a straight, so they might win high, but player 2 wins regardless of the straight player 1 has. But because half the pot goes to the high, half the pot goes to the low, just to be clear here, this player is going to win with their straight half the pot. Actually, they have an 8-4, so their straight would be an 8 high straight for the high, and then this player has the tray ace for the low, which is 7, 6, 5 tray ace. And as you guys know, if there's not 3 cards that are unpaired that are 8 or lower on the board, then there can't be a low. But as a dealer, you never tell that to the players. So let's see. Van Shark says, high-low pro tip, only play hands that can win high or low. Ace, ace, king 9 is a fold in high-low. I'm certainly not one for very intelligent strategy, although I do work with Michael Lockey Poker Pro with my live poker coaching brand. If you want to check that out, you can go to live poker coaching, one word, live poker coaching on YouTube, and we have a handful of videos out. We're going to put out 500 total videos in a series of simulated 2-5 no limit Texas Hold'em. But he plays a lot of pot limit or all that stuff. But I do tend to believe you, Van Shark. I understand. So it's tough, right? If you have ace, ace, king 9, say that it's double suited, you have no chance of winning a low. Man, you're automatically giving up half the pot right off the bat. On the other hand, you have taken 2 of the aces out of the deck. I think that there might be an argument to maybe play that hand anyway, but it's probably not a great argument. But that is sort of interesting. Van Shark says, wow, thanks. I'm curious what that's in response to. I think I just missed it in my head. Whoops. I dropped a spacer somewhere. Those things can be tough to find. Let's see, what else do we got here? Did I have any other YouTube comments that I wanted to answer? Dave put another comment. If you're wanting to figure out kills and straddles, check this video out. You'll get your questions answered. I saw kill games at many rooms, but never understood them. Now I do. That's in the Texas Hold'em course. Appreciate that shout out. Let's see. So yeah, so for everybody that's listening, next week my format of the live stream is going to be different. Easy E says, "What's up? What's up?" Next week I am going to have Masters of Cards on. I mentioned this at the beginning. And he is a magician who is great with cards, and he's come on one of the live streams in the chat before and started talking to me about surveillance and what he could get by surveillance, and I gave him my insights and experience, and we're going to have a great conversation next week in the live stream about surveillance. No, it's I think you're saying, is this Joe? No, it's Masters of Cards. I think his name is Gene. Or maybe he goes by Joe too. Let's see. I'm gonna look at it right now. Yeah, he's a really great guy. I've chatted with him a little bit. It looks like he's in Brazil and his primary language appears to be Portuguese. But I'm really curious. I haven't actually talked to him. I've done a lot of messaging back and forth in emails, and I'm really curious what his English is like. It was very clean when it was written, so I imagine it'll be good. And man, he's got a lot of personality and he's got really good skills. I've had some of my magician friends sort of watch his stuff and give me some feedback, and so I'm super excited because he's good. He's got great sleight of hand and stuff like that. So Easy E said, "Is this Joe?" And then he said, "Joe Mama." So we have a comedian in the audience right now. And yes, I don't mind reading a comment like that for some entertainment, because even though it's incredibly lame, there's also a little bit of entertainment there, you know. Maybe he's like 8 years old, and that's the level of humor that he's at. I don't know. So if other people maybe laugh, then it's probably worth it. Let's see. So I am going to wrap it up pretty soon. It's been a little over an hour so far now, or it's been almost an hour as it turns out. I started a little bit late today, but yeah, I'm going to wrap it up now. So if you have any more questions, feel free to jump in and ask them, and I will answer whatever we have left. And next week, like I said, it's going to be a slightly different format, and I'm pretty excited for that. And let's see. Van Shark says, "Thanks again." And we removed Easy E from the chat. Let's see. Dave says, "Thanks for addressing my question." Jason says, "Thanks, Mark." Van Shark says, "Thanks again. See you next week." And yeah, absolutely, guys. Appreciate you all here. Enjoy spending time with all of you. And I will see you guys later. So have a great week.